All right, guys, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Monday, June 4th. I'll start with the S&P chart as I always do. But just as I said this morning in the trading room pre-market, I don't really think there's much to kind of overanalyze here. Yes, we got a nice close and we're above this range, but I see a lot of overanalyzing of S&P charts. That's fine, right? That S&P, jumped up 40 basis points and out of this range. I think that's good. I think that's overall good for the market. We're above value now. We're also above this little dotted trend line that I've got drawn. So, pretty good. However, really where the strength has been and really where the momentum has been is not really in S&P names, or I would say not in the whole group. Individual names, really, that's where the momentum has been in the market. So Qs, right? So if you've been looking at the S&P chart, and overanalyzing it, I would say maybe you're playing this game a little bit wrong. Uh, the Qs, they broke out. They're almost at a 52-week high. They have had the momentum over the last week. Look at the move out of this consolidation. Really, really nice move there. IWM, the small caps have just been blistering. They've been breaking out the last couple weeks. So again, you go back to that S&P chart, and people have been waiting and watching and waiting, and but everything else, there's no, I shouldn't say that. Not everything else, but there's been a lot of groups that have really been performing well. So, that's our job. My job running a trading room and my job running a subscription service like this is to find what is moving in the market. And certainly, I've not really been in the S&P and playing in that game. Again, just a lot better things going on. Another good example of that, which I've been talking about ad nauseum, is basically large cap biotech. But I saw somebody say this today. I saw somebody say this in another chat room today. They're like, maybe these biotechs can actually get going. I didn't respond to this person, but you've missed the boat. I mean, this is large cap biotech, right? Market cap weighted biotech. However, the move has already been, you've already missed the move, in small cap biotech, if that's your thought. This is now up close to 30% year to date, small cap biotech, PSCH, and one of the best performers in the US in terms of groups or subgroups. And the other group that I continue to talk about is XHE. Look at the equipment stocks in healthcare. So if you've been watching biotech and you've been if you've been watching the IBB ETF, you're doing it wrong. And again, that's what we try to find. Look at this move. This XHE is also, I think, up close to, I want to say, let's see if I can find it. I think close to around 25% year to date. Let's see if I can find it quickly. Performance, let's see. Yeah, year to date up 21%. Again, you go to IBB. So why is that? So first of all, let me give a little bit of explanation instead of being sarcastic with the IBB just up 2.8%. It's basically the weighting of the structure of the ETF, right? The IBB is market cap weighted. So the biggest names are the biggest weights, and they're really going to drive the performance. What's really been holding up the performance of this IBB ETF is the small caps, and unfortunately, those small cap names are, because it's a market cap weighted ETF. Again, meaning the bigger names, the bigger companies get a larger weight in the ETF. The small cap names, even though they've been outperforming like huge, and some of them are in this ETF, they're not really going to be able to pull the cart as much as if they were, as big of weight as Biogen and Amgen, Celgene, and Gilead. By the way, Gilead actually had some good news on it, and that moved up. We did see some call buying in that name. But my point here is, if you're looking at these groups of stocks, you have to make sure that you're watching the right ones. You can't just say look at a biotech ETF and think that you're going to capture the performance in this market. You have to be in the right one. You have to find the stocks that are actually moving. And what I do on a routine basis is I break down, and I go through the individual names to find out what's going on. Inside of them. So again, if you look at this XHE ETF, if you follow, like, let's say Investor Business Daily's report, like they continuously have like ABMD as one of their top names. But really, if you look at any of these names, DXCM, INGN, Penn, Penubra, uh, QDEL, these names have been flying. Align Technology. This has been where your alpha is in this market. So that's the one area. And trust me, I will get to the option activity. But again, there's been so many things that have been outside of option activity. If you've been, I hate to say this, but you have to have a little bit stronger game than just watching option activity. There's been a ton of names that have been moving and have been performing really well, and there isn't any option activity in them. So if you're just kind of waiting for that, and just counting on option activity, it's a nice tool to have in your tool chest, which I use option activity, but it's certainly you're missing out on a lot of big moves if that's what if that's your only indicator or thing that you're using in this market, because there's been no option activity in XHE or the majority of those names that I've mentioned. Let's go over to another group that's been pretty strong. First of all, emerging markets. Finally, the dollar kind of eased up the strength. EM still not above the 200-day moving average, but we talked about, well, I didn't do a video on Friday, but it was one of the trades that I took in the trading room on Friday was to go long EEM. There was I think 40,000 calls that went up in July. I bought some for 45, took a target at 55 today, but at least have a target. And we'll see what this can do. One of the strongest groups right now is the Chinese internet names. They have really gotten going the last couple days, which is great. I'm long this group. And, we could go through about 5 or 6 names here quickly, but I know the one that everybody's been talking about is this IQ name. This does look kind of a toppy looking candle to me. I do not have a position in this one. I did for a little bit, but I missed the last leg of it. There's been a couple other names that are actually, in the small cap arena right now. This one that I have up to the left is this Sogu. I'm not even sure if that's how you pronounce it, but finished a little bit off the highs, actually hit 11. So I'm going to talk just for 1 minute. How do you play these names that have crazy momentum? If you caught them out of the breakout or out of this flag pattern, congratulations to you. This little I don't even know this. I wouldn't necessarily call this a flag pattern, but maybe out of this consolidation, if you hit it right here and you were long, congratulations. Up 13%. But let's say you're staring at this thing now and you see some calls go up, July calls. So I brought this up purposely. How do you play this thing? Well, number one, I don't think you could take a super big position in this. I think this is very, very, very speculative stuff, but I personally want to participate, right? So what I did, somewhere in here, I think around 1070, I kind of just bit the bullet and I bought 100 shares. So what am I going to do with that position at this point? Well, if it consolidates, right? I mean, this IQ gave you a little bit of a chance to get in it. Even after it broke out of this, it kind of digested a little bit. If you were really picky and try to get it filled down here, you were not going to get filled. You missed the whole thing by being, picky. So I think with this, you start with a small position, as I did. I just bought 100 shares. Maybe I want to grow to 300 or 400 shares, maybe a $3,000 or $4,000 position. But for now, I'm not going to go crazy chasing it. I'm going to use this. So where do you use a stop, right? Where would you get out of this thing if it completely fails and goes the other way? I would say this top of value, 990. Am I going to be upset if I lose $100, or around $100? No. So you have to keep tabs on the name, especially if it's something like this that's highly speculative. But you could also, if it starts to have a couple inside days and kind of backs and fills a little bit, that's where you want to be adding. And maybe I'll grow my position if it happens. If it doesn't, and this becomes a freight train and goes up like IQ, at least I have a little bit. Maybe I'll add another 50 shares or something like that into the strength. But for now, you start a small position, and that's all you could really do. And anything else I think is too risky. I think if I were to go in full boat, I think you're just kind of, that's a little bit too speculative for me, and it's not so much trading, it's more just gambling a bit. So that's what I would say on the Sogu, which we're seeing some call buying. But I wanted to talk a little bit of strategy about that and how you can play one of these names, because I know a lot of people throw charts out there, and after the fact it goes up, everybody's cheering, whatever. But a lot of it is the strategy, right, of how to really handle this kind of stuff. And then again, you want to honor that stop, because if this thing does fall apart, and we've seen a number of Chinese internets do that before. I think QD is a good one, for example. QD, that fell apart and ended up being. This was one where I played here. Once it broke down, I got out of it. Luckily, I even played it after earnings and tried it again, and it completely fell apart. So you have to do that. Not everyone is going to be the IQ. So you have to really be disciplined with this highly speculative stuff. But a couple other names really, really strong in this group. Baidu got going today. This was a big winner for me. If I pull up the trades tab for Baidu, I had sold a put spread at about $3.90. I bought it back today for 65 cents. That's a huge winner. I did that into the consolidation. This I thought was too big of a pullback. It pulled back right into support. That's to me where I want to be selling put spreads. After a big move down into support, still in an uptrend, that worked really well. A couple other Let me go through a few other of the Chinese internet names again, because you could look at the overall ETF, but really to find out where the momentum is, you want to drill down into those individual names. And I could do that if I bring up this, and if we just look at KWeb. And again, my approach for some of these groups is to own the ETF, and then to go ahead and have what's called the core satellite approach, right? Have a core position in the ETF, and then maybe have a few satellite smaller positions in the in the individual names. Why isn't this working for me? Yeah, a few other ones. JD had a big name. I'm not in that name, even though we saw big call buying. JD has kind of been in a downtrend, but perhaps it's gotten a little bit too cheap down here. So up 5.7%. Congrats if you're in that one. Again, repeat call buying. So call buying has done pretty well in that one. You could see a few other names. I was actually looking at Wuba this weekend. I did not take it. But it is up 1.5%, and it did get back above all the short-term moving averages. So that may be a one, and this is one that had good earnings and kind of sold off on good earnings. That's what kind of caught my eye with that one. But I don't even think that was one of the best performers out of the group. But anyway, very strong. That ETF did end up 1.7%. What was even better than that today was retail. Up to, I don't really have too much in this space, but I did see some names that are moving pretty nicely. We did see a tiny bit of call buying in Home Depot. Home Depot looks pretty good here, moving out of consolidation. So nice little move here. Did kind of pop a little bit, and that's what some of these names do. They just kind of digest for a little bit in an uptrend. And I would keep my eye on that one. There was a January call buyer in the Home Depot. Twitter. So just go to just a couple other names that we've been seeing repeat call activity. Finished close to the highs. This one we saw calls go up all day, right? So this was a good kind of indicator that the momentum players are in this. There was positioning in this all last week, by the way. So I personally I don't really like to follow these momentum weekly call buyers. There was some January calls, a little bit more January calls that went up today. I think they're right here. But we saw these all last week. I think 3 or 4 days last week. We saw these little January 37, 39, 40 strike call buyers. We also saw a big block in Twitter last week as well. So that's a good example of a name that worked very well on option activity. I took profits today in NVIDIA. I've been holding this now for, I think, a couple weeks. Made a 52-week high. I think it can go higher, but really this is what I was looking for, is a move back to the 52-week highs, after coming into support and finding support. This was a really nice candle. I went long right in here, and 52-week high in this one. AMD is another one. I'm not in AMD, but continuous call buying. A bit overbought here. It's an 82. So there was a positive note by Bank of America this morning on both those names. And it is really overbought here. The RSI is 82. Personally, I would be taking profits. but that's just me. I don't own any of this name. We talked about that. There's some Yandex calls. That's a name that's gotten pretty beaten up. Like I mentioned, JD. There was a JD call buyer this morning. Microsoft call buyer. There's a nice call buyer in Agilent this morning. They have their investor day, I believe, on Wednesday. I did take a small trade in this. It was a June call buyer, so I never really take that big of a trade for excuse me, I never take a really large trade for something that has that short expiration, but I like the chunkiness of the trade, and they do have that investor day. So, I would like to, ultimately, I would like to hit another target in that today. Roku saw a little bit more of calls today. That was a name that was on the watch list for Tribeca Trade Group members that I put out this weekend. I think it looks pretty good. It took out Friday's high, up 2.6%. I bought stock today in this. The calls are just, the implied volatility is just too high. I would rather play, again, in your toolbox of things that you want to use. You want to sometimes buy stock. Sometimes there's opportunities to buy calls where they're cheap, or to sell premium. All things that you can do. One of the trades that I put on Friday, Real Page. We talked about this one in the trading room on Friday, making a nice move here. I did put on I bought a call spread and sold a put spread, so that one working out pretty nicely. That was a late trade on Friday. I did put on. I looked at a bunch of the gamers. They didn't move that much today. ATVI actually finished down a little bit, which sometimes happens after a big green day. I did put on a trade in that space too as well. I put on a call spread looking for this thing to continue to punch higher in ATVI. A few other names that we saw at the end of the day, which I thought were pretty interesting. First of all, this unit. This is I think the third time we've seen calls go up, and I want to almost say consecutive days, but real nice strong move in this unit. Charging up here, you got a VPOC up here at $27. A few other names to go over. MLNX. Again, short dated calls, just going out to June expiration. But I would watch this name. It's been moving in the right direction, but slow. I just feel like there's something going on in this name too. We've seen this name hit a couple times now. Stay, this one, this trade went up at the end of the day. This is extended stay. This one, you have to kind of zoom out a bit and take a look at the overall pattern. It's just above the 200-day moving average. You could see it's gapped up recently. I don't know what the news was on the gap up. Let me try zooming out now. One more time. Yep. So you could see that it was once a $26 stock, so it's still way under that. And if it holds this move here, I would think that this thing, I can kind of see why they bought October calls. Hain is another very speculative name. They bought some calls in that. There was also, which I don't have on the list, ECA, which is a name that we've been seeing repeat call activity. So some buying into some weakness, also more buying into weakness of IGT. This is probably my worst position on right now. This has not been working at all. But every time I go to sell this position and kind of throw in the towel, they keep teasing me by buying more calls. So I don't know if they're selling stock and then buying calls. I don't know. There's also a VPOC down here at $24. I was actually hoping for this thing to be taken out. Maybe that's close enough, as far as the low price, because it did rebound after it saw those calls go up. For now, I'm still in the trade, but it's been my worst performer, I would say. Also, another name, because I like to talk about the names that we see the dip buying in. Win, must be some, I think this irked a lot of people to see Win down this much, but sometimes there's just a big seller. There wasn't really a lot of news in the stock other than, I think, the Deutsche Bank brought their price target down in the stock, but sometimes there's no news and stocks go down, and sometimes there's just somebody's unloading a big position. And that could be what's going on here in Win. On the positive side, it did take out one of those purple lines, one of the VPOCs. If I could do one more refresh here. It did take out this VPOC down. This version point of this point of control was never touched before, so you might see a little bit of reversion back here. Final name that I'll go over. I think that's enough for today. I almost talked for 20 minutes. Apologize for such a long video, but IOVA. I don't know what they're doing here, but they bought calls aggressively in the last couple minutes. Keep an eye on that name, IOVA. That's another small cap biotech that saw some calls go up at the end of the day. All right, guys. Thank you for watching the video. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.